Pranks are often seen as harmless fun, but sometimes these so-called jokes take a dark and deadly turn. What starts out as laughter can quickly spiral into disaster, leaving behind heartbreak and shock. In this video, we're diving into 5 real cases where pranks ended in tragedy. Stories of lives cut short because a stunt went way too far.
One of the hospital workers who was duped by Australian disc jockeys into believing the Queen of England was on the phone for Kate Middleton has been found dead under mysterious circumstances.
It was December 4th, 2012, in London. Inside King Edward VII's hospital, a quiet, devoted nurse began her shift. Her name was Jacintha Saldana, 46 years old, far from her birthplace of Shirva, India, and the life she once knew. She had worked in Oman, sacrificed years away from her family, and eventually moved with her husband to the United Kingdom, chasing a better future for their 2 children. That Tuesday morning, however, something unfolded that no one could have predicted. At 5:30 a.m., the hospital phone rang. On the other end were 2 Australian radio presenters, Mel Greig and Mike Christian from 2Day FM in Sydney. Their plan? A prank call. They wanted to trick the hospital into revealing private details about Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, who had just been admitted for severe morning sickness. The hosts slipped into ridiculous impersonations, one pretending to be Queen Elizabeth, the other trying his best at Prince Charles. The accents were exaggerated, almost cartoonish, but in the stillness of that hospital ward, Jacintha believed them. Without hesitation, she transferred the call to the nurse caring for the Duchess. Information about the Duchess's condition was given away, confidential details that would be broadcast across the world the very next day. To the radio hosts, it was entertainment. To Jacintha, it was the beginning of her worst nightmare. Colleagues later remembered how shaken she was, how she kept blaming herself over and over. She confided in another nurse through email, writing that it was all her fault, that she felt very bad, that she didn't know what to do. The hospital publicly reassured her that she wasn't to blame, but Jacintha couldn't shake the weight pressing on her chest. And then came another cruel twist. Just an hour after the prank, one of the DJs reportedly called her again, this time revealing that it was all a joke and would soon be aired. Imagine that moment. No media training, no preparation, suddenly caught in a trap that was spiraling out of control. The laughter of strangers was about to become her shame. She withdrew. The woman, who never missed a nightly call to her family in Bristol, suddenly went silent. Her husband, Benedict, grew worried when she didn't answer the phone. 3 days later, on December 7th, staff entered her room at the nurse's quarters. Jacintha was unresponsive. She had taken her own life. The discovery shocked the world. Investigators found 3 handwritten notes, one blaming the radio hosts, another giving instructions for her funeral, and a third criticizing how the hospital handled the incident. Her death sparked outrage across continents. In India, protests erupted. Crowds carried banners demanding justice for Jacintha, calling out the cruelty of the prank. Her family insisted there had been no marital troubles. Her sister said Jacintha spoke with her husband every single day, their bond unshaken. She had even raised her niece as her own daughter. Her mother, already struggling with a weak heart, broke down when she finally learned the truth. On December 17th, her body was brought back to Shirva, her village in India, just as she had requested in one of her notes. Over 1,000 mourners filled the funeral, a sea of grief that stretched far beyond her hometown. Meanwhile, the backlash against the radio station was swift and brutal. Advertisers fled. The show was pulled off air. The station donated $500,000 Australian dollars to her family as a memorial fund. Mel Greig later claimed she had begged producers to edit the call but was ignored. She eventually left the station, even suing for damages, while Mike Christian returned to radio and was, shockingly, rewarded by his network. Investigations followed, but the results left many uneasy. British prosecutors declared the prank misguided but not malicious. No charges were filed, yet Australia's media watchdog ruled the station had broken broadcast rules and treated Jacintha unfairly. In the end, no one was held accountable. On November 29, 2019, in a small village, 43-year-old Zolt Gobolos walked into the local pub for what seemed like an ordinary evening. He wasn't the type to stir trouble. People knew him as an honest, kind man. He had 4 children, though life's hardships meant he couldn't raise them on his own. Their godmother, Ramona, a young woman of just 27, had stepped in to care for them. Still, Zsolt tried to stay close, to remain part of their lives. That night, before leaving, he told his father he was only stepping out to the store. It was the last time they would ever speak. At the pub, Zsolt sat outside on the terrace. The air was biting, the night heavy with frost. He rested his head on the table and drifted into sleep. To anyone else, it was harmless, just a tired man dozing off. But to 3 people there, it became an opportunity for cruelty. Instead of letting him be, they decided to make him the punchline of a joke. They dragged over a chair, tied it to his back, and bound his hands and feet with electrical tape. They laughed as they did it. The bartender didn't stop them. He filmed it. That video spread quickly through the village. To most, it was just a prank, something to laugh at. But no one thought about what would happen once the pub closed its doors, leaving Zsolt tied up, helpless, and trapped outside in the freezing night. He had fallen asleep around 7 p.m. Hours passed. The tape cut into his wrists. The chair pinned him down. He was awake for much of it, struggling, shivering, fighting against the cold. At some point, he slipped from the table onto the hard ground, but he couldn't move. He was bound, left like an animal in the frost. The temperature dropped lower and lower. His body began shutting down. By 4 a.m., nearly 10 hours later, a bus driver spotted him. He called for help, but it was too late. Zsolt's body had lost its fight against the cold. Severe hypothermia had taken over. By the time paramedics arrived, there was no saving him. The news rippled through the village like a nightmare. Ramona, the woman who had been raising his children, had to face the unimaginable task of telling them their father was never coming home. His father, 68-year-old Imre, could barely comprehend it. He had spoken to his son only hours before. Now he was gone, tied up and left to die while others laughed. The owner of the pub refused to speak, giving no answer for why his employee filmed the cruelty instead of helping. Police questioned the 3 men and charged them with negligent homicide, death by reckless actions. They were released while the case dragged on. One of the suspect's mothers wept, insisting her son hadn't been involved, but for Zsolt's family the damage was done. It was the night of October 28, 2021, in Romford, East London. The streets were quiet, and inside a modest home on Queen's Park Road, 88-year-old Josephine Smith was likely asleep upstairs. She lived alone, cherished by her family, remembered as gentle, kind, and caring. To her loved ones, she was the heart of the family. To her neighbors, she was a warm presence. But that night, 2 teenagers wandering the streets nearby made a reckless choice that would end her life in the most senseless way imaginable. 18-year-old Kai Cooper and his 15-year-old friend had already built reputations for trouble. Cooper had run-ins with the law before, and the younger boy had been involved in disruptive incidents since early adolescence. On that October evening, they came up with a plan. They walked into a fireworks shop, where Cooper told the clerk, 59-year-old Mark Vardy, that he wanted fireworks that would go far and quick. For just $8.99, they walked out with 10 megaburst fireworks. But it wasn't just fireworks they wanted. Cooper made his intentions clear. Loud enough for others to hear, he told his girlfriend that people were going to be terrorized that night. Soon after, they bought lighters and hit the streets, launching fireworks at cars, restaurants, pubs, and even at random pedestrians. CCTV footage later showed terrified people ducking for cover as explosions cracked through the night. Cooper egged his friend on, handing him fireworks and cheering him as chaos spread. This wasn't new. Just a day before, the pair had cornered a young woman in Ilford. Video found on Cooper's phone showed his 15-year-old accomplice acting aggressively as Cooper urged him on. When the girl fell, Cooper encouraged him to continue. It was a pattern. Reckless violence masked as entertainment. By the time they reached Queens Park Road, their next target was chosen at random. Josephine Smith had no connection to them. She didn't know their names. She never even saw their faces. Yet her home became their playground. Cooper's girlfriend later testified that he was the instigator, pushing the idea forward. The younger boy lit one of the megabursts, sprinted across the street, and shoved it through Josephine's letterbox while Cooper stood nearby, watching. Seconds later, the first blast shook the house, then another. Flames spread, smoke filled the air, and Josephine, resting upstairs in her bed, was trapped. She likely never had time to react. Neighbors alerted emergency services, and firefighters rushed in. But by 11:09 p.m., Josephine was pronounced dead. The cause? Smoke inhalation. Meanwhile, the teenagers fled the scene without remorse. No panic, no guilt, just silence. When the case went to court, prosecutors made it clear this was no prank gone wrong. This was deliberate. Cooper had bought the fireworks, bought the lighters, and filmed their earlier attack. He knew exactly what he was doing. At the Old Bailey, he was found guilty of unlawfully causing death and reckless behavior with fire. He received 6.5 years in custody, with an additional 2 years on extended license. His younger accomplice, who admitted guilt earlier, was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months in a youth facility. But justice did little to soothe Josephine's family. Her son, Alan Smith, spoke of the devastation, of how losing his mother in such a horrific way had left scars that would never fade. He questioned how fireworks could be sold so casually. CCTV footage showed Cooper openly declaring his plans to terrorize people in front of the shop clerk, who still went ahead with the sale. When police asked for that footage, Vardy delayed handing it over, and his own son even edited parts out. For that, Vardy later received a 1-year suspended sentence. Josephine's family has since called for stricter laws, raising the legal age for fireworks to 21, requiring a minimum spend, and enforcing tighter checks on sellers. For them, every spark in the night is now a reminder of the fire that stole their mother's life. Detective Chief Inspector Linda Bradley, who led the case, summed it up plainly. Josephine Smith was an innocent woman in her own home where she should have been safe. She never spoke to these boys. She never knew them. Yet their reckless, heartless actions turned her home into a trap and took her life. It was August 17, 2011, in Circleville, Ohio town, just southeast of Columbus. That afternoon, 2 elderly sisters, 81-year-old Jean Shea and her 85-year-old sister Mary Spangler, were doing something they had done countless times before, running errands together. They had spent their whole lives in this community. Mary had dedicated 30 years of her life to River Brothers Oil in Chillicothe and remained active in her church, while Jean, also retired, cherished the simple routines of small-town life. The sisters were inseparable, and that day felt like any other. But as they approached the intersection at State Route 56, something wasn't right. The stop sign that should have warned Jean to halt at the crossing didn't look like a stop sign at all. It was gleaming oddly, wrapped tightly in thick layers of plastic wrap. Petroleum jelly smeared across its face caught the sun, making it appear nothing more than a blur of shiny metal. To Jean, from behind the wheel, there was nothing to warn her of danger ahead. At 4:45 p.m., she drove straight through the intersection. In an instant, another vehicle traveling down Route 56 slammed into her car at full speed. The crash was devastating. Mary Spangler was killed on impact. Jean was rushed to Grant Medical Center in Columbus, her body broken, her leg so badly mangled that doctors prepared to amputate. When first responders arrived, what they saw horrified them. The stop sign wasn't damaged. It had been deliberately sabotaged. Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe later described the layers of plastic as massive and intentional. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had set a trap. As news spread, people in Circleville began calling the sheriff's office. Some had noticed the strange-looking stop sign earlier that day but hadn't reported it. Others pointed investigators to disturbing posts on Facebook made by 2 local teenagers, 18-year-old Derek Greenlee and 19-year-old Seth Stone. Both had just graduated high school, one a star golfer. the other a basketball player. Online, they bragged about pranks they'd pulled, wrapping cars in plastic, and, more recently, a stop sign. The post disappeared soon after the crash, but not before deputies got their hands on Walmart surveillance footage showing the teens buying 5 boxes of plastic wrap. One even signed his name on the receipt. Under pressure, Seth Stone admitted he was the one who wrapped the stop sign. Greenlee, he claimed, stayed in the truck. Greenlee reportedly said it was a bad idea, but he never stopped his friend, never warned anyone afterward, and never took responsibility until it was too late. The law did not see it as harmless fun. Both were charged with involuntary manslaughter and tampering with a traffic control device. Greenlee's wrongful death charge was later dropped by a judge, but Stone faced the full weight of the case. By then, the damage was irreversible. After 3 long weeks in the hospital, Jeanne Shea passed away from complications. Doctors had been preparing to amputate her leg, but her body gave out before the surgery. 2 sisters, beloved members of their community, were gone, victims of a prank that was anything but funny. At the crash site, the grief was raw. Neighbors built a small memorial, wooden crosses, flowers, and handwritten notes. One message read, "To the cowardly people who covered this stop sign, you caused the death of an elderly woman. May God have mercy on your souls." But the anger only grew worse when it was revealed that a sheriff's dispatcher, Corporal Kimberly Chapman, had received 2 calls about the suspicious stop sign hours before the crash and chose to do nothing. She was later fired for neglect of duty. In court, defense lawyers argued that not every tragedy was a crime, but prosecutors pointed to the teenagers' bragging posts, their attempt to erase the evidence, and the sheer recklessness of the act. Both teens eventually posted $2,500 bonds, awaiting a grand jury. It was the night of August 31st, 2025, in East Houston, Texas. At a family birthday party, 11-year-old Julian Guzman and his 10-year-old cousin slipped outside for one last game before the night was over. They were inseparable, more like brothers than cousins, and that night they weren't looking for trouble. They just wanted to stretch the joy of childhood a little longer. The game was innocent, one kids have played for decades. Ding-dong ditch, ring a doorbell, run, laugh before anyone can catch you. To them, it was nothing more than harmless fun. The boys darted from house to house, ringing, sprinting, giggling in the shadows. No one yelled, no one chased them. To the boys, it felt safe, ordinary, just another story they'd tell the next day. Then they reached a blue 2-story house on Mimbro Street. Wide porch, still windows. It looked perfect. Julian crept forward, tapped the bell, and bolted into the night with his cousin beside him. They barely made it 20 feet before everything changed. The door creaked open, and a man dressed in black stepped out. His name was Gonzalo Leon Jr., a 42-year-old Army veteran. He wasn't just checking the door. He wasn't just peering into the night. He walked all the way to the edge of his property, stopped beneath a street sign, and raised a firearm. The first shot tore into the ground. The second ripped into Julian's back. The boy collapsed, his cries splitting the night air. His cousin, frozen in shock, dropped to his knees and tried desperately to drag him out of the street. He was just a child, terrified and helpless, trying to save the only friend he had in that moment. Julian's phone, still recording, captured everything. The prank, the shots, the chaos, and his fading voice. Evidence that showed exactly what happened, and evidence that would later haunt everyone who heard it. Paramedics rushed Julian to the hospital. His family clung to hope. But the next day, despite everything doctors tried, he was gone, 11 years old, taken over a prank that wasn't supposed to be more than a joke. At first, Leon wasn't arrested, but within days, prosecutors charged him, declaring his actions intentional. When a SWAT team found him at a hotel 20 miles away, his bags were packed. To prosecutors, it looked like an escape. His attorney claimed he just wanted distance from the swarm of cameras. Inside his home, investigators uncovered nearly 20 weapons, rifles, handguns, an arsenal. His military past was raised in his defense. He had served in Afghanistan. He had worn the uniform of the Texas National Guard. His lawyer described him as a disabled veteran. But prosecutors drew a hard line. Julian posed no threat. He was a child running away down a public street. and the community knew this wasn't an isolated tragedy. Just 2 years earlier, in California, a man had chased teenagers playing the same prank, mowing them down with his car. Earlier that same year, a Virginia man had shot a teenager filming a ding-dong ditch video for TikTok. What once seemed like a harmless childhood game had become deadly in a world where fear and rage lived just beneath the surface. On September 5th, the family held a visitation. The funeral followed the next day. His parents, his 2 brothers, his many friends, they all gathered, forced to say goodbye far too soon.